Mention recording, suddenly everybody got all silent.
I know. I know. Exactly. I guess real fast while we wait, let me share this with you guys. Oh, hey, look, Noah, looking fancy. Okay, let me do this real fast. In case you haven't seen this and we have a minute to spare. Just in light of election week. Okay, I think, how many do we have on here right now? 43? Okay, let's get going. So welcome everyone to the November Collaborative, Fresno County Suicide Prevention Collaborative. We're excited to have you on here, and especially hearing that there's new people and new faces. So welcome to all of you. If at any point today during the meeting you have a question or a comment, please feel free to throw it in the chat on the bottom, and we will answer and address all of those that we are able to. And we welcome you to do so. Also, just a reminder that this is a collaborative attempt. So if you attend and you think, oh, I'm just here to view or to watch, and everybody else comes up with the ideas or what we want to accomplish, that is not true. We want your input and your insight, because each one of you are an expert in your own field. And so we do invite anyone and everyone in this collaborative to just get involved and say what you want to say and bring to the table what you can, so that this is a true collaborative. So we please invite you to speak up. Okay, so our agenda today is first we're going to do, I think a lot of you've all received the poll that Solomon sent out, but I don't think everyone's had the opportunity to fill it out. So we're going to take a minute here in just a second and just do a quick Zoom poll so that you can answer all the questions. If you've already answered them in the email from Solomon, then please don't take part in today's survey, because we don't want to double count your votes. Oh, there they are. But please, you could take a minute and do that. And then we're going to hear from Noah Whitaker, which we're excited about having him today. And then we're going to have a discussion around the survey results and collaborative feedback, and then the goals for 2021. Then we'll hear from Brian Bishop on a cool new directing change kind of challenge that we're bringing to the county. And then we'll finish with announcements and any Q&A. So can you all see that poll on your screens? Yes? Okay. So please, I think there's 5 questions. If you can just take a moment, if you have not already filled it out, and start filling in those answers. And we'll leave it up there for a couple of minutes, and then we will kind of review the ones we've received 32 over email in the past week or so, and then we'll combine it with these, and we'll kind of get some feedback and have a discussion. So, and then also for any questions that are open-ended, you could just throw them in the chat, and we'll record them that way. So just take a minute to let those come in. Okay, they're still coming in. do we think that's about it? I know that a lot of these are probably duplicates that have
Does
already
anybody need more time? Taking the poll.
Okay, I think that's it. So thank you for that. And Lisa's gonna hurriedly count those votes. Okay, so I'm gonna turn it over because I want to make sure that we have plenty of time for Noah today. And Noah, I'm gonna let you kind of. I know you've got. We love Noah. I think a lot of you know who he is, but maybe some of those folks who are just joining us do not. So Noah Whitaker is going to talk today about crisis coping theory. He's the task force director. He runs the loss team out in Tulare County, and he's with the Tulare County Suicide Prevention Task Force. So Noah, we're going to hand it over to you, and you can, the floor is yours.
Good morning, folks. It's nice to meet such a lovely and diverse audience. This is incredible. 4 years in, I believe now. And look, there's so many faces that were there before the collaborative even formed from the sheriff's meeting. And to me, this is the heart of good efforts. People who are committed, who have built knowledge and expertise over time, as well as the new folks that we got to meet on the call. And it is so exciting to see these efforts thrive. So I always like to ask an initial question, just for sake of clarity. When do you want me to stop talking?
I think we had said 45 minutes, so a bit before 11 would be great.
Okay, so I will set a 40-minute timer just
Perfect.
to ensure.
Thanks, Noah.
Cool. So I love the NBC weather comment as well, because I like to do things like a weatherman. So I love that vibe. So hi, my name's up there. I'm Noah. As I do in all of my presentations, I love to include my license number, again, because people listen to licensed individuals, and it's one of my favorite gags. So even though you guys have heard it, I'm going to use it again. That's my driver's license number. I am not a licensed clinician. I'm an MBA by training and a suicide loss survivor, not by choice, but a champion for hope, certainly by choice. So you can reach me, email address, phone number, and I'll step to the side so you can see the lovely thank yous. I didn't capitalize the Q in DeQuincy's name. He's going to hurt me. DeQuincy really was integral in the efforts, of course, of the Fresno Collaborative, but also in the formation of these theories, because part of the theory that I'll discuss is the suicidal crisis path, which was developed by DeQuincy. So really this model is a fusion of a few different models, and it creates something new. So that's where we'll kind of walk through the 3 different models, as well as taking a look at how they combine. Because in the Fresno strategic plan that we wrote just a few years ago, that's really the basis for understanding the different interventions, recommendations, and also really helps us, or helps you rather, to plot the pathway forward on an ongoing basis. So I also like to point out some of the other ones, which are Dr. Frank Campbell. Whoa, I'm gonna lose my balance now. Let's go this way instead. Dr. Frank Campbell, Baton Rouge, Louisiana Crisis Center. Frank's work also is really the underpinning work that forms crisis coping theory. So I've worked a lot with Frank to kind of refine some of the thoughts and ideas that we've had, but Frank's efforts really set the basis for this. Carla Sawyer's a public health nurse, and I consider family. She lost her son, Bo, to suicide more than 12 years ago, and has been one of the biggest centerpieces in our local efforts for more than a decade. Patrick Power was a theater instructor in high school when, after I lost my own father to suicide, Pat gave me a place of belongingness. And so in a presentation like this, I think it's essential to say, this high school theater teacher probably saved my life. And at very minimum, when we go through the crisis coping theory, he helped set my trajectory, not from suicide, not from maladaptive, not from restorative, but to adaptive, because an individual in a non-mental health field saw somebody who was hurting, they stepped forward, they showed compassion, and they saved lives. So I think it's great to point out Pat, because I wouldn't be in front of you today if it wasn't for him. And I most certainly wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for my wife. So I think those are my acknowledgements. And now I just need to get my clicker right. There we go. So you all are familiar with the state of California, of course, but I just like to mention this because this is sort of how a lot of people perceive our state. Oh, and for those of you who aren't like super like Zoom savvy, if I'm just like a tiny little window, if you pin me, I'll be a bigger window, and then my words aren't as like super microscopic, though they'll still be small. But this is really just to kind of humorously highlight the complexity within our own state, let alone a topic like suicide. So it's just sort of an acknowledgement that we're going into pretty complex waters, and that's okay. These theories should help us understand those waters. And ultimately, one of the drivers behind this is one of my favorite quotes from the QPR Institute, which is just basically a statement of like, how can we have culpability for something we don't understand and something we haven't been trained on? So that's really a major part of suicide prevention efforts, is getting people up to a level of competency so that they can be responsible for helping to save lives. This is another model that I actually came across on LinkedIn from Alan. And Alan, with permission down here, allows me to use this graph because I like it. Oh, I'll step a little bit more out of the way. And this to me is really just a different way of looking at the social ecological model, which is one of the three models that we're going to look at. And it's to say these problems at the very top above the surface, like suicides, overdoses, and things, they're being driven by many other factors. And so if we're just looking at intercepting above the water, we're missing a lot of the opportunities to disrupt the development into those issues. And that, again, is part of the suicidal crisis pathway model and crisis coping theory. So these are the three models that we'll take a look at today. I'll very lightly look at the social ecological model. We'll look at crisis coping theory, and we'll look at the suicidal crisis path and how the three of them combine to drive our understanding in this area. So we'll open it up for discussion again. I always love to start with this. I've started with this for about 8 years now. What color is this dress? And this is like an unmute participate opportunity.
White and gold.
All right, we got one in the white and gold camp.
Black, purple.
Black and purple. And we've got a black and blue.
Or
How about
Gray and periwinkle.
Brandy, can you throw up a quick poll? Let's get interactive.
Lisa, can you do that?
If not, it's no big deal.
Black and blue.
But wait a minute.
Astro Lisa.
White and gold, blue and black and blue, that's the same. Black and violet, that's good. Gray and periwinkle, that's creative. White and gold. Wait, how many presentations are you guys looking at? Because there's one image here. What do you mean all these different colors? So the reason I love this so much is because it is showing diversity, even here in this training, even looking at the same thing. And this truly is representative of something like suicide. We're all staring at the same fact, assuming you're paying attention. We're staring at the same fact, but we're perceiving it differently. And who's wrong? None of you are. It's incredible. So when we approach a subject like suicide that is phenomenally more complex than a party dress, we have to understand that we're all going to see it from different perspectives. We're going to see it from different shades of understanding. And that's biological. There's gender differences with that. The color will change based off of how tired you are or what you've been eating. So all of that influences perception. So this is really important, I think, as an underpinning to begin a presentation to say, everybody's right. So now we'll kind of go into that a little bit. First model, social ecological model. And this is just sort of like our blush approach. Now, in a topic like suicide, due to things like stigma, most people focus on the individual level. Is it this person's fault? They were selfish. Things like that. A lot of statements directed at the individual. And there are individual characteristics that contribute to suicide. However, we're not islands. We interact at an interpersonal level as well. Our friends, our family, our kin, our coworkers, our subcultural groups, and their perceptions, their skills, their training, their knowledge, as well as their ideology drives a lot of factors in our relationships and our suicidality. And an interesting interchange here is while most people will say statements to folks who are depressed, like, you just need to get over it, or pull yourself up by your bootstraps, or one of a million other things that we all hear that are stigmatizing. Well, data and research shows that the more an individual becomes suicidal, the less capable they are of help seeking. So we cannot lay this issue at the individual level. Interpersonal level, yes, this is where we're conducting trainings in things like ASSIST and QPR, Safe Talk, mental health first aid, trauma-informed care. A lot of these things help us look at interpersonal relationships, and there's therapeutic interventions like parent-child interaction therapy. The whole ACEs notion is looking at these interpersonal relationships and the impact that they have on the individual. So that's where an interpersonal level comes in as important. Organizationally, does an organization have policies and procedures that support good mental health, that support suicide intervention? Do they have grief and bereavement leave? Do they support getting trained on this? Do they have an organizational capacity to intervene? Do they see it even as being important? And do they have the resources to devote to this if they do view it as being important? Now we look at the community level. That's all you guys here. You do represent different organizations, and some of you are individuals representing yourselves or perhaps representing an ideology. But here we're functioning at the community level because we're coming together from our different organizations, our different walks of life, and we're combining to make a difference. Now, even though Tulare County's been like 13 or 14 years in with our task force, and you have been in like 4 years with your task force, we look across the state, and although there's more task forces than there used to be, not every county has one still. So that is a community difference that impacts the availability for help, care, treatment, and support. And then the underdriver, public policy. Do you have laws? Do you have ordinances? Do you have funding? Do you have mandates that make differences here? We saw the big shift that was occurring 3 years ago when Assembly Bill 2246 was being written and discussed and then chaptered into suicide prevention policies or pupil policies. And now, actually yesterday, I just started looking at a document that I didn't even know existed until yesterday that's all talking about AB 2246 impact and its youth task forces who have been informing those efforts and basically how most schools have been ignoring them. But that public policy really is the driver. And I know in our community, as in yours, the Mental Health Services Act, Proposition 63, has been utterly transformative. And I'll just leave it at that. I won't talk about how it's constantly under attack and things, although it is. But it has been transformative legislation that none of this really probably would have been possible without it. So the impact that that legislation can have throughout this continuum is essential. And this is really the social ecological model where you're understanding all of these influences across different layers that have an impact on whatever it is you're focusing on. In this case, suicide, but it's relevant to any other public health subject. I just figured out my clicker was controlling Zoom and not my slides. So now we'll look at crisis coping theory. And this is just a blush overview. We'll go through the theory in a moment. But again, I'm introducing to the three theories. So this theory, you'll notice there's no tickers at the bottom on time because time is not relevant as far as if it's an hour, a week, a day, a month, a year. And on coping, I'm not giving specific measures here. You can look into data, research, and literature to find different screening and assessment tools to determine level of coping. That's not the purpose of this theoretical model. This is a conceptual model to help us get our heads around it. So we'll go through the stages of this model in a moment. The other important thing with this model is it fuses concepts from crises or crisis response field, the grief field, thanatology, which is the study of death, some business concepts, as well as theater to help us get a good conceptual understanding of how suicide works across the lifespan. This is the most simple view of our third model, which is the suicidal crisis path model. And this is the work of Dr. DeQuincy Lazine. So hopefully I'll do a good job representing his work. But what we'll see is how these different phases along the suicidal crisis path stack up and or match really well with crisis coping, and how the social ecological model is really a lens through which we can view every stage of movement through these models. Because as we're here, we look at the individual, the interpersonal, the organizational, the community, etc. So that's how we sort of look through this model. So hopefully that makes understanding, because at the end, when we weld it together, it can look super confusing like this. But when we walk through it, it makes sense. So we'll start with one of my absolute favorite videos. And we already had the sort of uncusping of the cussing. So I think we're solid gold to have a video with a little sweary in it. What I need to do for this, though, is actually change from my webcam to a true screen share to get the audio for you all. One of my absolute favorite videos, especially in the context of a presentation like this, because it shows in a very lighthearted and joking way, which I appreciate, a very deep, serious, and complex issue in a way that we almost never discuss it, which is through the lens of the bully and what's driving those behaviors. But we clearly see intergenerational trauma. We clearly see numerous markers of adverse childhood experiences. We could approach this through the lens of trauma-informed care, and we can have interventions and supports to diffuse this situation. And we can understand more complex situations by breaking them down into digestible chunks and see how these behaviors are influenced by those experiences, and where we can therefore have successful interventions to disrupt the bullying behavior, help the bully resolve those issues, as bullies are as at risk or more at risk for suicide than the targets of their behavior, according to research. And now we can disrupt bullying, which disrupts suicidal activity for both the bully as well as the victim. So it's a great lens through which to view these complex theories in very practical ways. So I think I've already kind of gone through the social ecological model in sufficient detail. So I'll just kind of pass this slide and we'll dig into crisis coping theory. So again, in crisis coping theory, the axes down here, the time frame doesn't matter as much. That axis over there doesn't matter as much. We're looking at the flow across time, and that flow is different for different individuals. If you've gone through training around the stages of grief, or you've actually read the book, people have that misconception that it's this stepwise model that you go through stage 1 into stage 2 into stage 3. And the book itself specifies that's not the way that the stages work. It's a fluid movement sort of back and forth. Well, this is fairly similar. We live in a fluid environment and we enter from one side, which is our stasis. And in the theater world, stasis is the world before action or something changes and generates. So really, this whole period here of life is stasis. It's our normal everyday flow of things. And within this period of stasis, we have stressors and we have supports and the potential for what would be called a hazardous atmosphere. And basically what we're looking at is fluctuation. The more that our ability to cope is driven by stressors and supports, and the more that they fluctuate, the more hazardous our atmosphere is, because we're spending so much time and energy reacting to external things. And some of this can be internalized as well, such as a degradation in our own mental health, a substance abuse relapse, or things like that. But it's also important to point out that if you look at what those stressors and supports are labeled as, they're the same. Because what can be a stressor one moment can be a support another. And anyone who has ever had a relationship of any kind, or a lack thereof, knows that relationships can be supports or they can be stressors. Most commonly, they're both. Did I get my morning coffee? No, usually it's a support. Today it's a big stressor, so my coping ability dips. And this is how we filter through our everyday life. Now, if normal stressors are creating large swings, that's an indicator for assessment because maybe this person isn't emotionally regulated. So as we'll see when we combined models, there's opportunities to intervene there. Now, here in the graph, you'll see that we did have an elevated period of support, but now we're sort of experiencing some sort of a decline in our supports because our stressors are increasing. Now we experience a precipitating event. In theater, this would be called the breaking of stasis. Now, to understand this a little better, if you watch an action film, almost all action films start with stasis already broken. You're in a car scene, you're in a bank heist, you're in a shootout. Action is already happening, and what started that action happened before the film began. Life, though, doesn't necessarily work that way, except it does, because our parents, our guardians, our caregivers, they set the stage of our birth, our early childhood experiences, and that develops our stasis. And that is where we look at things like ACEs, again, adverse childhood experiences, and what we do about that. Can we have resiliency and mindfulness training in these kids, even those that haven't experienced it, because we know at some point in their life, they will experience trauma. So we're equipping them early to tackle that issue. But a precipitating event is an event that occurs that's significant to the individual as self-defined. I might be able to leave a job and take a new job and no problem whatsoever as me, as my individual makeup. But another person might go through a period of pretty severe decompensation because they're changing environments, they're changing support systems, they're learning something new, and it can be stressful. An important element with a precipitating event is it does not have to be negative. They can also be positive events. It is a disruptive event from normal life. This could be even, like a marriage, good or bad. This could be all kinds of different changes, but it's significant. Usually, though, with negative experiences, we see this sudden period of additional stressors and drop-offs of supports. So you have a death. Immediately, your high stress situation, and if you don't have immediate supports, your ability to cope is going to get impacted. That is a natural reaction. This also can indicate some shock reaction and things like that. But we have a sudden sharp decline. Now, commonly what we see is following that sharp decline, supports come in. And anybody who's lost somebody to death probably has experienced something, I hope, like a refrigerator filled with casseroles, because their community members, their partners, their support system saw a need, stepped in temporarily. They buoyed them up. They see, oh, look, Noah seems to be doing good again. I don't need to call him every day. I don't need to visit him as much. But guess what? Noah wasn't doing good, and the supports back off. So Noah goes to his current level of functioning, which is reduced, and I'm back in crises. But now I've got this sort of boomerang effect because I had supports, but they're not there, and now I'm further isolated. So during a time period like this, you can have the advent of suicidal ideation, even for individuals who haven't struggled with ideation before. And this is this period of uncertainty or ambivalence in which, do I want to live or do I want to die? Some people, they'll literally sit down and they'll make lists and they'll do balance columns and things like, these are the good things in my life and these are the bad things in my life. Some people just do that mentally. Other people, it processes in the back of their mind. But this is a common period for thoughts about wanting to die by suicide. Now, when we look at the potential outcomes of this, our worst outcome, of course, would be a death by suicide. We also can pick up maladaptive coping skills. And I'm usually careful in presentations to point out that most maladaptive coping skills, they were very successful short-term strategies. People plied in drugs, they plied in alcohol, they plied in sexual behavior, they used anger to deal with a situation, and it helped them for a few moments. but in the moderate to long term, very destructive and reduces our ability to cope. It can whittle away at some of our support systems and make some of our previously successful supports, like coping strategies, no longer successful because we've replaced them with bad coping. And when we go back into our new stasis, rather than functioning at a level here, we enter the model at a level here, which makes it harder for us to adapt to stressors in the future without building back up our ability to cope over time. So then we look at a restorative model. And this is where we just kind of get put back together. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're better off or worse off. We've picked up some good things, we've picked up some bad things, and overall, our daily functioning returns to our approximate level of stasis. Oddly enough, most of the time, this is what people shoot for. And it's kind of mind-boggling to me. Even in this era of the pandemic, when you're talking to folks, they're like, man, I wish things were just normal again. Really? Because I remember 2019 and it wasn't like a parade with roses. There was a lot of crap that we needed to work on and get better. And it's not this magical, mystical time period. I don't want to go back to 2019. No, thank you. I want to go into 2021 without the pandemic, of course, but I want to go into 2021 with reduced numbers of Zoom meetings, but with Zoom meetings, with some of this social distancing, because I do kind of dig that. I dig that people are, for the most part, a little bit nicer to each other, present election excluded, and things are kind of getting better. That is how humanity works, and that's how a model like this works. We don't want to go to restorative. We want to pick up new coping skills, new support systems. We want to get rid of some of the stressors that we can, and we want to go into an adaptive strategy. That means that as a result of whatever this precipitating event was, and our journey through rough times, we picked up enough skills and support to be better than we were when we began. That's the basis of crisis coping theory. So now we look at DeQuince's model, the suicidal crisis path. And here we have these direct stages. And DeQuince's model also integrates a few other models in the field. And I always think it's important to point at work like Dr. Joyner's work in The Suicidal Mind. This is an essential book. I do recommend it as reading for anybody. Dr. Joyner's work, I cannot understate how influential it is, how well researched it is, how they have the data and variables associated with things. So I don't want to take away from Dr. Joyner's work at all. And I don't even view these as competing models or theories. We've integrated a lot of the ideas from Dr. Joyner's work into these models. So this, though, gives us some bins along a pathway in which we can now understand different stressors, different supports, that social ecological model during each of these little pods, and where we as a community can intervene.
That's what I was figuring.
So again, social ecological model, essential throughout this process as well. Now, that model, which is now at the top, that's the simplified view. So we'll go in and we'll look at each of these stages, what's sort of happening here, because we have our stasis level, the world in which things were before something shook it up. And here we have feeders into that hazardous environment where our ability to cope increases and decreases. We have biological experiences and like a specific physiology. Maybe our serotonin levels are off. Maybe they're not. Maybe we're born with a disability that has other impacts. You know, we're missing an arm and it just makes life more challenging. There could be a lot of biological factors here, but life events come into effect. So is it nature or is it nurture? It's both. It's almost always both. Now we also have some behaviors that can also be seen here. Do we have increases or do we have the presence of risk taking? Because that's a factor that can increase risk. Do we have the shifting brain chemistry? That actually should be a small s, but has adverse childhood experiences occurred for this individual? These are all factors that can heighten risk. Also higher risk among those who experience a mental illness, those with substance abuse issues. These negative treatments So a way to think of like a negative treatment would be, for example, among the LGBTQ community and the, gosh, what's that horrible model? The change one where I forget the name of it, where they just basically, they want to therapy you to not be gay.
Conversion?
Gosh,
Conversion. Conversion.
Yeah, conversion therapy.
Conversion therapy.
Yes. So were you a victim of conversion therapy? Do you have these relationship problems? So all of these factors can heighten risk. So here we look at the precipitating event, and we're moving along the pathway. So there weren't successful interventions, there weren't supports that came into place. We continue down the pathway. So now we have new emotional and mental health experiences. How long does it take for somebody to get an assessment? After they get an assessment, how long would it take them to get medications? Do they even need medications? Is part of the assessment process looking at their additional social emotional supports? Are they plugged in a community of faith? Do they have activities in which they feel they can contribute and they're of a value? All of this comes into an effect when we have this event that breaks stasis. What is their makeup? Do they have hope? Do they not have hope? Are they an optimist? Are they a pessimist? These are important. Do they feel trapped? This is an essential one. These are all risk factors that you would see listed on, say, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention's website or on the American Association of Suicidology. They were using an acronym that I still like, is PATH WARM: ideation, substance abuse, purposelessness, anxiety, feeling trapped, feeling hopeless, withdrawal, anger, recklessness, and mood changes. I did it. So it's PATH WARM. All of these things are coming in through the precipitating event and what we're trying to assess for. So when people are going out into the field and doing something like a 5150 assessment, these are the factors that they're really looking for. And now, are they suicidal or not? Have they indicated those warning signs from is PATH WARM? Or do we have additional screening tools? Are we using the ACEs screener to elicit for some of this? If all of those systems aren't working, we continue along the pathway. Do they have the capacity to act? This is an important notion within Thomas Joyner's work in particular. And capability, do they own something like a firearm? Do they have medications? Do they have access to razors or things like that? Do they have the knowledge and how to use those implements? Do they have an intent? You might own a gun, but you never plan to use it on yourself or anyone else, but you still have a gun. So you have the capability, but you might not have the intent. These are all things that we were looking at when we were engaging in the trainings that we did 2 years ago around, oh God, why am I drawing another blank? Dr. Kelly Posner's work. Oh, why am I drawing a blank? We did a whole big old training on it too. Okay, rather than get stuck on that, I'll just move along. But it's Kelly Posner's work, whatever the title of that is, that's escaping me. We were conducting the trainings along that. It's you're looking at assessing for risk and driving from there. So again, we move along the pathway. This person had ideology, they had intent, there were no interventions, there were no supports, nothing happened, and we lead to a suicide attempt. So now here, when we're looking at suicide attempts, we're looking at lethality, because ultimately where we're trying to intervene at this point is if we failed on stopping the attempt, can we at least minimize the lethality of the event? And when we're looking through here, we're looking at two key factors to determine if an attempt will be fatal or not. This is basically our last window for intervention, is trying to prevent the attempt from happening. And if you can't prevent the attempt from happening, you're risking deaths. So one aspect to consider really is the lethality of the attempt. And this is to say, would this act lead to a death if no intervention takes place? So if I use a firearm and I point it at my skull and I pull the trigger, is that likely to lead to my death, even if a medical intervention was present or available? If I shot myself in the lobby of an ER, how likely would they be to help me survive? Well, what if I ingested a bottle of Tylenol? it's less lethal. It provides more opportunity for intervention. So is an intervention even possible is one of the factors. The second factor is really the quality of that intervention that's available. One of the experiences that I know that I had and my wife and I had is we had a baby up at Valley Children's Hospital in the NICU. She was a micropreemie, a 24-weeker, 1 pound, 8 ounces. And we happened to be blessed to be up in Fresno when we learned that we were going to lose our other child leading to this birth. And we went to the hospital to St. Agnes. St. Agnes has an antepartum unit that helped us stay with the baby longer before birth. And then the baby was transported immediately to Valley Children's. If my wife and I had been in our own community in Tulare County, our local hospital is not equipped with an antepartum unit. And at that time, they didn't have that level of NICU. Our child, Evangeline, would have died in our community. They literally would have handed her to us and said, these are your last moments. But because we were in your community and we had those medical interventions present, my daughter's alive today. So this is the concept there. Are medical interventions there? And if they're there, are they of good quality? And not just medical interventions, it's any intervention. Is there a Patrick Power in your school that notices a child who's hurting and who intervenes? This is really an essential element here. But I do want to stay more focused on the medical side because here we're talking about an attempt, and by and at large, we need medical interventions when an attempt takes place. Now we're dealing with the aftermath of a suicide. Here we have this, again, this complex model of the stasis feeding in, but now we have a lost survivor. And now we have these varying effects. We still have the precipitating event, which in this case is the death of suicide. That feeds into different loss characteristics. Do you have grief? Now suicide is normalized in your life. Suicide becomes, quote unquote, an option. You face the stigma and the loss, the stressors of now having this person out of your life. If they were your child or your spouse or your parent, you've lost that relationship and everything that goes along with it. You also potentially have a genetic risk. You have the stigma, not only of mental illness, but of being a suicide loss survivor. Typically, loss survivors feel more isolated because of the stigma of suicide. Some people are afraid they'll catch it or something, so they pull back. I know it's a very common thing to hear from survivors that, well, I lost my brother in a car accident and I had more casseroles than my refrigerator could hold, but I lost my sister to suicide and I didn't even get a phone call from anybody. Unfortunately, that's not an uncommon experience. Decreased support systems leads to further withdrawal because an individual has been abandoned by their community, by their interpersonal relationships, by their organization, by their legislation. Loss teams exist through goodwill, not through legislation. Heightened risk, higher risk for complicated grief. Complicated grief takes much longer to resolve. There's elements of trauma that must be addressed and worked through. It is not a normal grief process. And one of the problems, again, when we look at high quality care, a lot of people go in for grief counseling when really they need trauma counseling before they can even begin to work with the grief. So again, we might have grief counselors available, but do we have trauma counseling available? Can we feed somebody through trauma counseling and then into grief counseling so that we can move to restorative levels? Do we have cognitive behavioral therapy available? Dialectical behavioral therapy? Is trauma-informed care present in this system? So we layer these models and we get to see all of these opportunities for intervention and support where we can build programs, where we can conduct training, where we can plug them in along the model. So prevention and early intervention is occurring between stasis and heightening risk. Early intervention because we already have heightened risk, but we don't yet have action. Clinical intervention because we have indication. Here, we now have further clinical intervention through this period of crises, usually emergency response, a psychiatric emergency response team, peer counseling supports, when somebody's in a heightened period that might be elevated but not yet crises. These supports can come in after a suicide death and we're in postvention. Do we have a loss team? So these models help us understand that. And again, we're looking at all of these through the lens of the social ecological model. What's the individual impact here? What's the interpersonal impact, etc. Ooh, that's pretty good. So again, let's see, I dismiss. We're looking at that layered approach. And here we add the social ecological model. So my goal was at the beginning of the presentation, this slide just looks like absolute gobbledygook. And you're like, Noah, what the hell is that? And now when you look at this slide, hopefully it makes a lot of sense. And when you break into your different groups, your subcommittees, you look across this span, you look at the level of functioning of the individuals, and you look across the levels of individual, interpersonal, etc. And it helps us now break down a very complex subject into a logic model, essentially, and say, well, great, we can't do everything across the entire span, but with our limited resources and our community will, we believe we can get some programs in here. We think we can get a program in here. We know there's a program here, and we can get some better training to the people in the program here. So you now can set those specific targets, and over time, you can show we built here, we trained here, we conducted there, and that's how our strategies will impact suicide in our community.
Noah, thank you so much. Does anybody have, we want to spend a little bit of time opening up the, anybody to ask questions. You could throw them in the chat or you can unmute yourself if you'd like. We have a few more minutes that we can allow for questions. Noah, while we're waiting for those to come in, I do want to say that I've seen this presentation a couple times now, and I love the video that you share. And I think that you are such an engaging speaker that has so much information, but also passion. And so I really appreciate any time I get to hear you speak. And during this, I did get a few texts saying, this is amazing. So kudos to you. And we really appreciate you speaking today. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm just honestly super stoked to see this group. Like, yes, 4 years in, you're adding people. You've got the regular faces. This is so exciting to me.
Yeah. Okay, you're getting a couple questions in the chat. If you could provide your contact info again, and people are dittoing that. So you're gonna.
So one of the benefits with that too is I shared a PDF last night to Lisa, who I know is going to email this out to folks. So you'll get it that way. You also get it right there.
Perfect.
And if you don't want to have to, I can type that in chat too.
Noah, I want to add a couple of comments. Thank you for coming back to share with us, because I agree with Brandy. I've heard this multiple times and I am appreciative of it every time. I learn something new each time, but I also think it's important and it reminds us why we don't hear information once, check a box and move on. Because each time I've heard your presentation, it reminds me of things I've heard before that have kind of just gone to the back of my memory. It brings it back up front and keeps the dialogue fresh and ongoing, so that our work just as effective as it was the first time we heard this. So thank you.
I think you all might be excited to know too, especially the long timers, that this theoretical model, which was really developed through the work with Fresno, has been kind of sucked up to the state level, and they've been looking at that. It formed the basis of the suicide prevention efforts in Santa Cruz County. I'm currently talking with San Luis Obispo County as well. Certainly I've implemented this model in Tulare County, and also with other communities across the country now. And it comes from your efforts and your community will.
I have a quick question.
One note to make real quick though, and Maria, then you just go ahead and ask.
Yeah.
You mentioned that this is being recorded and that you're going to post it. If you post it to YouTube, you'll need somebody to edit out the Key and Peele video, and I would recommend just put a link to the video there. Otherwise, you'll get a copyright flag from YouTube. Okay, go ahead, Maria, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. My question comes from the, you're talking about the stigma that comes with the suicide survivors, loss of that. I wanted to get a few more tips in terms of, I recently received a news of a family that did lose a loved one, death by suicide. And, I'm having I guess the tips are coming from like how would you approach a family who is wanting to keep, they said discretion, but have told a few people here on the campus. And now my angle is coming from a spot of support and really trying to support them however I can, but also keeping the discretion in mind.
Well, first and foremost, I would respect them. It's their choice. How they want to tell people, it's 100% up to them. I can direct them to some research and literature to help them understand the negative impacts that those decisions can have or some of the positive influences, but ultimately it has to be their decision. And I think I always view my role, and I encourage others to be navigators. I kind of like to call myself Virgil from Dante's Inferno, where I'm trapped in hell. So the best that I can do is help somebody else along their journey. And so that's sort of the model that I use. I point people towards peer support groups because being able to connect with peers is their best understanding of what they're going through, as well as they get to hear experience from other survivors that are maybe a few more years into it, what the outcomes of their decisions were. And it becomes more of a collaborative decision-making process. There's a wonderful website, Alliance of Hope, which is based out of Hawaii. And it is a phenomenal online forum for other survivors to connect. I like to provide a variety of approaches because, there's no panacea. Some people like to read, some people don't. So I'll give them Jack Jordan's book on grief. It's a phenomenal book, one of my favorites. If somebody's lost a parent to suicide, I'll give them Brandy's book. And I'll say, read this and take a look at that, especially if they lost their mother. There are a lot of great books that are out there on different relationships to loss. So I try and develop this sort of catalog of books where I can get specific relationships of loss to specific people because it'll resonate with them more. And I think an encouragement into individual and family counseling because they're going to need it and benefit from it. So those are some of those basic strategies that I would take. I also would look at the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. They have a group, I always forget if it's their new name or their old, but you can look it up through Healing Conversations. Again, I just can't remember if that's their old branding or their new, but in that, it basically initiates a phone call from a lost survivor at that national level. Locally, of course, I'm pretty sure Heinz Hospice still runs some peer support groups and things like that for lost survivors. So I definitely would refer them over to there. And I would encourage them to speak to their faith community should they have one. This is all about finding more supports for people and bringing as many supports as possible and then let them filter it out.
Thank you.
Do we have any more questions? We have time for maybe one or two more. Otherwise, you could email Noah afterwards.
I'm actually going to print out like a little certificate for myself that I finished on time. Like this is an achievement. Yeah, so if you all come up with other questions or things like that, you've got my contact info, you're willing to shoot me something, I'll respond as promptly as I can. I'm always happy to try and help people find resources and connect. And oh my gosh, I just love watching what you guys are doing. I follow the social media. I follow what Ahmad especially posts through LinkedIn and things like that. And I am absolutely enamored with the work that your community is doing. I love it.
Thank you, Noah. A lot of the work that we do stems from you. So thank you for being on the ground floor of all that. Okay, if you could, perfect. Thank you. So I am going to share some of the results right now from the surveys that were sent in over email over last week, and then which are 32 of them. And then Lisa is going to share some of the results from today. So let me just show this real fast. So when asked to rank these 4 goals in order, with 1 being most important to 4 being least important, this is kind of the order it took is the Suicide Death Review Board, the firearm project that we talked about last month, I believe, Directing Change project, which Brian's actually going to talk about today, and then training for CEUs. So these are 4 goals that the steering team came up with. And so that is kind of how it ranked. And obviously we have a lot more goals that you guys kind of jumped in and added. So we're going to get to those. Let me see if, so that was kind of the breakdown. And then are there goals that you would like to see the collaborative work towards? So suicide education for parents and families, data for methods of suicide and reasons if known. I think some of these are going to be covered with maybe some of the gun project that we were talking about in the earlier slide. But promotion of the collaborative in Fresno Cares, develop promotional items and or educational materials, continue to build on 2020 goals, follow up on the CSSRS implementation, host, participate in more events, offer more trainings year round while implementing new 2021 goals. Supervision outreach. I'm not sure what that means, but maybe someone else does. If that was you on the earlier one over the week, you could just throw it in the chat with that, if you could elaborate a bit on that. Continue to be service oriented and reaching out to all groups across all socioeconomic boundaries. Making sure access to the collaborative. And then the schools put out a ton of flyers. It'd be nice to see infographics for other audiences as well. Okay. And then increasing visibility of resources. Yeah, I think that's good. How would you rate your current level of satisfaction? So I think that's good. We got a lot of 5 stars there. People's needs are being met in the collaborative, which is good to hear, 100%. And then for future meetings, this is kind of talking about how we want it to be held. Hybrid kind of wins out, which would be in person. However, you would have the option to attend online if you would like. And that's 53% of the votes, while 37 said to keep it virtual. So if we did a hybrid, then obviously those who want to stay virtual can. And so we will talk as, we will meet on the steering team and kind of figure out timing, if that is something that we are going to move forward with and when that will be. Kind of looking into 2021 of returning to in-person. And then what presentation or speakers would you like to have during our 2021 collaborative meeting? So we have a fantastic presentation planned for December, which I'm excited about. We'll talk about in a second. And then we are taking off January because it happens to fall, I think, on the 2nd or the 1st of, I think it's one of those days. So we're going to take off January and resume in February. However, we would love to have a speaker just like Noah today to be able to present every month. So if you have any ideas or things that you would like to see or interest, please throw it in the chat or email Solomon. That would be fantastic. Okay, so some of the speakers that people would like to see is youth wrap around services, the coroner. That one came up quite a bit. I think that everybody enjoyed having Kelly and Robert. We did have to put some of the review of the suicide deaths on hold just because of the format. We can't really have that on a recorded, just of the nature of the content. But that is something that we'd really like to get back once we're in person. Police department, sheriff's department, ER departments, districts sharing their prevention plans. Stan Collins, firearms means safety. The gunshot project, he also did a presentation recently that we got to see, and I think it's fantastic. And so we would like to have him come and do that for the collaborative. A survivor who's become involved with trying to make changes. Someone from the Jason Foundation, more from the coroner. We really like the review of the cases. Yeah, I did too. More parents who've lost a child to suicide or an attempt. people who've attempted or surviving. So I think these are fantastic ideas. And then it seems to be overall, I think, fantastic feedback. I think everyone seems to be happy with the collaborative. I'm really excited about a couple projects that are kind of coming down the road, and we'll kind of get to those as they kind of start unfolding a little bit. But we have some really exciting things that are happening for the community, and I think it's fantastic for Fresno County to be kind of so forward thinking in a lot of areas. So stay tuned for those. Lisa, can you share the results from today's? That was quick. Okay, so click. Okay, the goals. So suicide death review team, training for CEUs, firearm project. Okay, and then okay. How would you rate your current level? Very serious, satisfied. Okay, so good. We have no negative feedback. But if there ever was, we do encourage you to please reach out to myself or Solomon or someone on the steering team, as we would like to address anything if we can improve on anything, or if the format or anything that we can help. Everyone's goals are being met. That's awesome. For future meetings, how would you like? Okay, hybrid is still the same. And no answer. Did we get, oh, psych autopsy? Yeah. And then two things, just to kind of give you a little, okay, thanks, Lisa. We do have one of the things that came up in the comments a few times was to have like the 5150 process or emergency rooms or Exodus process, how that works, because I think so many people in the community are confused, or how does it work, or what allows a patient to stay in the hospital versus when they're released, and what that timing looks like. And so we actually have a presentation next month on that. And so we're really excited to invite a few folks from Valley Children's as well as CRMC. And so we're excited for that presentation. So that'll be for the December collaborative. Are there any other thoughts or questions or comments about any of the data that was, the surveys that was just shared?
Lisa, I wanted to add, when I was one of the people that said I don't know at the end of what I was interested in, but after reading that list, the coroner, I want to add that to one of your surveys. The coroner would be really interesting to hear speak. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, if there's nothing else, I'm going to turn it over to Brian Bishop, who's going to talk a bit about the Directing Change program and the film contest. And all right, Brian, over to you.
All right, hopefully you can hear me. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. There we go. All right, first, I think there's some new people in the audience here, or in the meeting. My name is Brian Bishop. I am the communication coordinator for Fresno County Department of Behavioral Health. I do a lot of work with media. I do a lot of work with a program called the Directing Change Program and Film Contest. I'm an advisor to that group. And if you don't know about the group, I'm just going to go over it pretty briefly because most of the people I think do know about it. But it's our #1 program for youth on how to make a difference with suicide prevention and mental health awareness. There's currently 7 different categories, which you can visit the website. I'm not going to go into detail on those categories, but there's 7 different ones now. If you go to directingchangeca.org, you can check those out. You can actually check those out right now if you want, but I'll go ahead and advance this. So we have been doing this for many, many years. I think I've been doing this for 8 or 9 years now. And I used to actually teach kids at a specialty school, and we would actually submit videos to this contest. Now I actually, again, am an advisor to the program. And what we've seen in Fresno County, at least, is a limited number of programs or organizations that get involved in this contest. And there's no reason why it should be so small. I think it really just comes down to dedication and really kind of pushing people to check out the program, because the program is really, really one of a kind. They've actually expanded from California. Now it's in, I think, Kansas and some other states, and has actually gone into Canada this year, I think. So it works. The program works. So beyond that, what we're looking for is I've termed the collaborative challenge for directing change. And what we're looking for is 50 different organizations in Fresno County to submit at least one video. In the past, we've only had about 10 different organizations, and in those 10 different organizations, we'd usually get about 25 to 30, maybe even 40 videos, but it was only with those 10 organizations. And I think I saw, like, we had 52 people, right? 52 people signed in today. So if we all got one organization, we would be able to meet this challenge. So the number one question I usually get is, who is it for? They have broken it down now to middle school and high school and young adults. The 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students can only submit to the Walk in Our Shoes category, which, again, if you go to the Directing Change website, you can check that out and see what is involved. But basically, it's toned down, so it's not suicide prevention, it's not anything of the heavier categories. My own kids have actually submitted to this a couple of years ago, and I think they actually won something, like honorable mention or something. But they love doing it. It was great, and back when they can actually get together with their friends, it was fun. The other categories are all open to kids from 9th grade all the way up to age 25. So we do have college students involved. We had a professor from Fresno State actually made it part of her class. So if you guys know any Fresno or any professors at any of the colleges, talk to them and see if they'll consider including this in part of their curriculum. One of the motivational factors in this is that there are prizes involved, monetary awards. So for the animated and through the lens of culture categories, it's $1,000 to $250, and kids love that. Who wouldn't love that, right? But that's just for those two categories. Through the lens of culture, again, check out the website and you'll be able to read on that, but that's really for specific groups, and it can be any type of culture. It could be the LGBTQ culture. It could be what we consider nerd culture, right? Or something like that. So the sky's the limit on those, and again, check out the website to read up on that. So the challenge itself, this is for all of us, is for each member of the collaborative to reach out to at least one organization. Send them to directingchangeca.org and connect with someone from that organization. And you just make sure that someone fills out an intent to direct form. Some of the eligible organizations can include middle schools, obviously, high schools, but also after-school programs, religious groups, scout groups, sports groups. You can see the rest. So don't just limit it to just schools, okay? I know this is going to be really hard this year with the COVID restrictions, but I think it's possible. I really do. And so I gave you an example here of a collaborative member named Brian. This is me. Brian has a daughter in middle school, and this is a true story. Brian connects his daughter with directingchangeca.org. Brian connects with an after-school group leader. For her, it's a singing group. She's in choir. Let's see, where did I go? She agrees to submit an intent to direct form for Brian's daughter and her 3 friends. Okay, so I'm connecting with that group leader. That's key, okay? you have to have an advisor with this contest. We don't want kids just going onto the site and not really having any accountability. So they want to have some sort of adult that kind of helps them and connects with them. So once the intent to direct form gets filled out, it gets sent to Solomon Vang on our group, and that's when the Suicide Prevention Collaborative group members find out, me included, some of the other team members, and we can assist those groups, those kids, if they have any questions, if they need any technical assistance. It just gives them another level of support, and pretty much that's it. So connecting with a leader from an organization, making sure they fill out that intent to direct, and then we take it from there. So I think we can do it. I apologize, the due date is actually March 1st, 2021. But that's right around the corner. That's less than 4 months away. And with all the holidays that are coming up, that'll be around the corner very, very quickly. And so, any questions on this? Do you guys think it's doable? Is it not doable? Is this ridiculous? What are your thoughts?
Brian, I do have one question. Does the kids doing the video, do they have to belong to a sort of organization, or can they just do it and have a parent be their leader? Or does it need to be a school or a coach or a?
That's a good question. I'm not sure if a parent can be their advisor. Maybe in this situation with the COVID restrictions, it would be a question that we can ask the directing change leaders that Stan and Yana. So I would say go for it, submit the intent to direct, and let them know the situation, and then go from there.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions for Brian?
Yeah, that would be, sorry, this is Deanna. My concern too, Brandy, is I had a friend who was a teacher at Clovis East, and a few years ago he had a group of his kids submit, and I think they won something, but Clovis schools aren't back in session yet, and high schools will be, but not until after the new year. So I'm not really sure how they would be able to do that.
Well, I would say they're probably going to have to get creative. They're going to have to talk to their teachers, their advisors, and tell them the situation. And this is where you might need to help them a little bit and just say, hey, can we use the Zoom function? We've got an idea for a video. And I mean, kids are pretty resourceful. We just have to help them a little bit along the way. So yeah, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard for kids to get physically together, but maybe this is the year of Zoom videos. I don't know.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Deanna.
I can share too, perhaps, just to maybe assuage some people's fears. We ran a student film competition that just ended on September 30th in our community that wasn't related to this. It was specific to COVID. It was difficult to engage some schools, but the schools were really looking for, or the teachers were looking for some projects and things, and the students were able to do those from their homes using like cell phones and things like that. So we did get some engagement. It was lower than anticipated, but I think you'll get some engagement through this as well, especially with the supports.
Excellent. Excellent. Anything else? All right, we'll check in next month to see if we can get any headway on this. Thank you for your time.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. I have been a judge on those videos for the last couple of years, and it's really fun to see what the kids come up with. So I hope to see a lot of local kids this time. Okay, so moving along to a couple of announcements. Saturday, November 21st, always the Saturday before Thanksgiving, is International Survivors of Suicide Loss Day, which is put on by AFSP. Usually they make a video, which is fantastic. It's a short video, and then they play it for groups that are congregating all over the world. Doubt that's going to happen this year, but hopefully the video will still be produced and put out for virtual gatherings. But we were curious as a collaborative if anybody had any ideas or any ways to support our community or survivors that we know of in a creative way from the collaborative itself. If anybody has any thoughts or suggestions. No, Noah.
So I don't know, Ahmad, can I get the thumbs up to share this to the group? What we were emailing back and forth about?
For the loss conference? Yeah.
Yep. All right, so what I wanted to share with us then, I had emailed Ahmad just to see if there might be some interest there, and what this stems from is National Suicide Prevention Week. All these counties came together and did this like really cool virtual conference. Tulare County was slated to host the National Loss Team Conference in October, and that didn't happen. So I've been working with our national committee to figure out what we can do, and we want to target in February to host the National Loss Team Conference virtually. And I wanted to reach out to the counties that participated in the September event to say, like, that was really cool. And I dig that environment of collaboration. So certainly Tulare County could just host the conference, but why? Let's collaborate. So wanted to approach you guys and see if you might have some interest in participating. Not asking for any money at all. So that's an easy ask because we were already going to host the conference. This was fully budgeted for us. We can't offer continuing education units though, because the provider that we use, CIBHS, informed us that due to COVID, they just didn't have capacity. So we're not targeting looking to offer CEs. But what we would be asking of your collaborative is choosing a presentation among a theme and a presenter, and that's it. They present that track. In all likelihood, there's going to be no charge for the conference, or it'll be a small charge of like $5 or something, just to make sure people have some buy-in. But the topics, and I'll send an email over to Ahmad and Lisa and whatnot for distribution. But we entertain some topical areas. COVID-19 and the impact on loss, the nuts and bolts of building a team, sustainability to keep the doors open. So we're looking at teams that have been around for 5 years or longer, volunteerism and everything that goes along with that, support group models. When am I ready? Which would be a training for loss survivors looking to become advocates, long-term survivors, those that have been 10 years and out, the Canyon of Why, urban versus rural differences in loss, and measuring with things like psychological autopsy. So I can send a list like that, and we're just asking our partner communities if one of those topics really connect with you, just find a presenter and a presentation, and that's how we'll structure this conference. What our other plan with this too is we want to start monthly fireside chats, so to speak, through Zoom, in which we're going to actually go in depth on each one of those subjects for the next year or so. And we want to do that again, monthly basis, probably a $5 chip in again, but it's going to be a Zoom-based meeting where we have different professionals from the field talking about that subject in a very conversational, not a presentation style, but a conversational exploration of the subject. So that's another opportunity should Fresno County choose to want to engage in that. We would love to collaborate with you and offer that. So again, monthly basis is a constant feeder and learning, and that hopefully will drive into the next loss conference. So there's my pitch.
Noah, so to two things. One, we've been already communicating that as a county, definitely interested in supporting and being involved with the loss conference. But I think it would make more sense for the collaborative as a whole to be doing this. So it's not just that, because we don't really operate independently of the collaborative. We do work so much in a partnership with our loss team and our first responders and the Suicide Prevention Lifeline, and I mean I can go through the list of everybody that's involved in that. So I think that would definitely make sense for us. And as being one of the few counties in California that has an active loss team, it really makes sense and it fits for Fresno to somehow, shape, be informed. But I just wanted to be clear for this one. This loss conference, just the one that we're talking about right now. So is this going to be a statewide, local, or are you still thinking like last year, like a national?
National. Yeah.
Okay, national.
Yeah, and we'll have international participants too, but it's not just local or regional. But what I want it to be is our region representing at the national level.
For sure. I mean, yeah, most of the loss teams are in this area of the state anyways. So that makes sense. Okay, yeah, I just wanted to because when we're talking about the loss conference, I want to make sure that we're leveraging then supports, and obviously the lost team, but things that are supporting on that for them nationally, and knowing, like you said, we may have people that are just curious of like, how would I do a lost team? So a lot of options. I don't think we determined that here, but yeah, that's Noah's pitch, and hopefully we can come up with something that we either agree to participate in, and then we can work on what those a presentation may be in those things. But cool. Sorry, I just want to get some clarifying.
Awesome. Thank you, Noah. Any other ideas for the Survivors Day from anyone? If you do come up with something, feel free to email Solomon about it, and we will kind of look at that and see if that's something that we can do. A couple of announcements for you. Speaking on that same topic, I know that Heinz Hospice is putting together a virtual memorial service that at the end of this meeting today, Solomon, as always, will send out all the announcements, and he'll include a flyer. So if you have anyone that's a survivor, please have them register. And it's a cool event. Usually it's in person, obviously, but this year it's that Saturday, the 21st, I think at 5 p.m. So we encourage you to send that on to any survivors that you might know. And then also in honor of National First Responders Day, which was on October 28th, Each Mind Matters hosted a suicide prevention for first responders Facebook Live panel. And it was a topic of discussion supporting the mental health of our first responders. So it had police chiefs and fire and from all over the state. And so there is a recording of that video and that training. If you would like to see it, Solomon is going to send out that information as well at the conclusion of today's meeting. But I know that Stan Collins was on that as well, and a lot of peer support coordinators and a lot of great folks. So if you are a first responder or know someone that is, you could also send them that link as well. And then are there any questions or any announcements that anybody in the collaborative needs to make?
Some of that material I think is Solomon's also gonna include, or Lisa, in the email blast that'll go out after the meeting. We'll also be including the PDF files from that first responder. So those resources will be there to kind of share with everyone as well.
Perfect. Any other announcements?
You typed it into chat, but did you want to just announce it over Zoom for everybody who's on the call?
Yeah, the Ending the Silence contest.
Yes.
Yeah, so I dropped a link in the chat box for everybody, and it kind of goes along with the Directing Change contest as well. NAMI's Ending the Silence presentation that's for youth, the mental health education and suicide prevention presentation we do in schools and for families and teaching staff, has a contest for new videos, and it is national, but the prize is $5,000. And the winner, it depends on how it's submitted. So it could be an individual, but it could also be a school program. The link has the information on the different categories, which are very similar to Directing Changes categories. Currently, that presentation has 5 videos embedded in it that are Directing Change videos. And we've been doing that nationally for several years now. So I think they're going to update some of the data in it and maybe just do a refresher for it. But I wanted everybody to know about the contest. The due date is sooner than Directing Changes due date. So students, youth, programs, whoever, if they get their videos done early, they could submit them to both contests for opportunities to win prizes. So I just want everybody to know about it.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. Any other announcements? Okay.
I think I'd like to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving, of course. So it's coming up. Keep yourselves in the spirit of the holidays.
Love the turkey.
Noah,
Noah's so fancy. He's too fancy for us.
Randy,
Yeah.
Probably by next month or at some point, we'll probably be either through email or in the next meeting sending some information on developments that we're working on. One, I think we discussed in a steering committee, and I thought we discussed in one of those. So we're continuing to work with both the source out of Visalia and the EOC's LGBTQ Center to have them be able to provide some specific LGBTQ support. And we're working on trying to do that for both adults and for TAY and families as a way of addressing and increasing some of those protective factors for a really high-risk group. And so that one we're kind of working, developing on, and we'll come back with obviously more information. And there's another project that's been in the pipeline, which is from our plan, but we're now trying to explore options of moving that and funding it and moving forward as an innovation program. So as we start working on that over the next like 2-3 weeks and get together a concept paper, we'll probably share that through email, because I don't know if we'll meet in time, but with the groups to just check your emails when they do come in from the collaborative, because there'll be some updates coming up hopefully over the next couple months.
Perfect. Yeah, I am excited about some of the things coming down. So, and then as a reminder, our next meeting is December 4th, 10 a.m. to 12, same thing. And if you have any questions, feel free to email Solomon. There's his contact information, or you can give him a call. He will send out the collaborative email later today. And I think that's it, unless there's any other questions, comments. Noah, that turkey. Thank you everyone for attending. It's always a joy to see you. And
there's a question in the chat about any suicide prevention trainings with certifications.
Oh, Ahmad. So it says, Ahmad, any certified suicide prevention training must be BBS.
I don't think any of the trainings that we currently provide CEs with it. So we have Assist, Safe Talk. I know David's team does some Suicide 101 and also Assist. I know Chris's team at NAMI does some trainings around that. And I think Farah's team at FCSS also does some Assist, but I don't believe any of them are ones that provide CEs that might be able to use for BBS. But I think when BBS put out the requirement of legislation of having new clinicians get trained, I think they just put an hour, I think like 8 hours of training. I think it was, I can't remember the exact time. I don't think they prescribed the specific curriculum. So something like Assist that's over 2 days would probably fulfill some of that requirement. Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Farah put the answer in there.
And
On the
we will,
website.
go ahead, Noah.
No, go. You can do it, Ken.
We are planning on putting on a CE probably early next year class on suicide for clinicians. Just we don't have a date or anything like that set. Go ahead, Noah.
On the Living Works website, they have a section in Assist that you can download some information that will help you qualify for CEs. So you should be able to submit that to your unit provider with the backup of your training, and you should be fine. But it's always good to check with your unit provider first, or who you turn your licensing into. They also are currently offering online training called Start. It's $25 per person. It's a 90-minute video-based training. And during the times where we can't do things like Assist and Safe Talk in person, it's actually quite a good online training. So I think I'm not sure if you can get CEs through that, but I think you might be able to.
Yeah, we're trying to provide that to our clinicians. We have about 25 clinicians, which BBS require for new clinicians, and actually requires for all clinicians to have that now, where to have 8 hours of suicide prevention. And it has to be approved by BBS. Unfortunately, that's why. I know we were talking about that before, Ahmad. This is Fausto, by the way. And we were going to look into, you guys were looking into being certified by BBS, am I right? To provide the CVs. Ahmad?
Yeah, we're looking at getting approval. I'm not sure what the entity is, maybe through Fresno State for BBS. And then we're also going to probably talk to Alliant for psychologists.
Alliant is good. All right, thank you.
And Solomon, do you remember which one of the Living Works trainings we licensed? Because we did for September, got 120 or so license and I think it may be the one that Noah was talking about because it's 90 minutes virtual, and I believe we actually got DSS took advantage of those, and we provided them, I think, with 100 licenses for that hour-and-a-half training. I know that because my wife was doing it at work. So that was a way for us, to get additional people trained in a virtual manner. It's not 8 hours, so it's not going to be something that I would address in that regard. But these were for social workers at DSS. So again, it's another way of increasing people's awareness around suicide risk factors, especially when we talk about social workers and child welfare that do work with, teens, youth at risk, that have a lot of things going on, experience trauma. So we're slowly expanding our training influence also. So with some of the work that Ken and the team is doing there, that'll hopefully address some of the additional specific clinical needs too.
Yeah.
Ahmad, I was going to just jump in because I just went and checked all my assist materials. And if you go to LivingWorks, like Noah was saying, you take a test. It's like $60 for 12 credits. And it says you're not even charged until you pass the exam. Now, this is old information and I haven't tried it, but it said that all the CEUs had approved providers like the NASW, APA, and NBCC. So I don't know if that counts. I know you're supposed to have BBS, but does it count if you have APA as well, or straight up has to be BBS? Okay.
APA and BBS, they're both certified. Yeah, they're both certified. The APA will count.
Okay, so yeah, if you do go to an assist training, and my understanding, which I'd be happy to look into it to make sure I'm still right, was you could take that anytime and get the credits if you had taken the training, but you need to have taken the training. So you'd have to have your certificate like Noah said. So I don't know if you guys get opportunities to do assist. I know that we do have some that are offered to the community that other people might be able to speak to. So anyways, just wanted to share that. That's
we have assist trainers in the department, and then I think we even I think David's on the call, but I think we got maybe one or two folks on David's team also trained in assist, so that we could increase just kind of the community capacity to provide assist as well. But I think with the COVID and I don't know how you do assist like virtually right now. So I think a lot of the assist are on hold.
The assist won't allow you to do it virtually. It's tied in, and then we actually did one this year, or in the midst of COVID. It raises a bit of difficulty just because of the distancing and how you have to do it and the way assist is set up, but we were able to do it. Yeah, like Ferris said, there is credits available. As far as everything I know, it does count because we've had some of our clinicians use it. But yeah, there's just an additional fee. Yeah, we still got trainers too, so.
Has a collaborative thought about doing our own 8-hour training. So we're kind of in the works right now, Cynthia, of kind of figuring out what we're going to do, but that is a training with CEUs is on the table right now for something that's being planned. So thank you. And okay, any other thoughts or questions?
A quick good of the order thing for you all, just to inform you about efforts that your neighbors are doing down in Tulare County. At our upcoming November meeting, we're actually going to take a vote as a collaborative to hyper-focus for the next 2 to 3 years on social emotional wellness, adverse childhood experiences, and trauma-informed care. So we're going to, all of our training, all of our resources and our efforts, we're going to pour into that area in partnership with our Office of Education, different school districts, our child service providers. So that's sort of what you'll see from your neighbors to the south.
Awesome. I love that. Please share with us whatever you guys develop or create, or anything that we could kind of collaborate with. Okay. Well, with that, I believe we are done. I hope everyone has a fantastic weekend, and it seems like it's gonna be cold and windy, so bundle up, make it seem like fall. And thank you all for attending, and thank you, Noah, for speaking, and have a great, it's Turkey's back. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Yeah, the turkey's facial recognition too.
That's so awesome.